What's up out there? We are back with some more Path of Exile 2, and in this video, I want to talk about the Heat of the Forge Ascendancy node on the Smith of Kitava. There's not really much information out there. This is more of a proof of concept than anything. It's theory crafting, build crafting, whatever you want to call this. I've actually got something working with it, but this build started life as a warrior does. I wasn't exactly sure what I wanted to do with it. I basically took Rolling Slam all the way from Act 1, from the very beginning of the game, up to Act 1 Cruel. Now, as I had to go and do the Ascendancy for this, I wasn't exactly sure which Ascendancy I wanted to pick, so I didn't have anything in mind, and I did a Titan last league, so I wasn't real keen on that. I knew I could build the Rolling Slam up into the Titan Ascendancy, but I was like, I don't really feel like messing with that. I already did one of those. I've got a Warbringer that's in the campaign flowing, almost done with the campaign there, doing some other things. What I wanted to do with this was something completely different, and that's why I stuck with Rolling Slam as long as I did. And basically, it is just Rolling Slam, Infernal Cry, and Herald of Ash. So there's nothing else to this, and there's not been anything else to this. I didn't mess with Mace Strike. I just took Rolling Slam, killed off all the bosses with it, which you could basically either kill the boss on the first try, or maybe they'd kill me once or twice and then I'd defeat them. Rolling Slam is pretty easy to roll through the bosses, literally, and roll through the campaign. I didn't struggle too much. I'm struggling now because of the changes that I've made, but I got into Act 1 Cruel with just Rolling Slam. When I had to pick the Ascendancy node for it, I wasn't exactly sure what I wanted to do. Like I said, I already tried Titan and Warbringer. I looked at the Smith of Kitava, and I know everybody else in the world is going down here to all the stuff you can do with armor. I was like, I want to do something different. I don't want to do just what everybody else does. And I looked at these nodes up here, and none of them really looked interesting. I've seen people using this temper weapon when that seems stupid to have to go stop in the middle of a fight and go wail on your weapon for a little while. This manifest weapon one looked kind of interesting, but this is probably going to be the last thing I try. The Coal Stoker and Forged in Flame, these are basically this same thing you get from the Chieftain in PoE 1. So I looked at the Heat of the Forge and I thought that looks really cool and I wanted to try it. So I did try it. If you look at the damage, basically what this does is it grants skill fire spell on hit, which shows up over here. And if you go look at the damage numbers for it, you'll see it's only 45 to 100. So it does basically nothing. And I think my Rolling Slam was doing about 4,000 or 5,000 damage or something like that. So when I first added this yesterday, I think it was Friday when I first tried this, it was only like 22 damage or 22 to 36. It was very low damage. It's built up a little bit, but it was very low damage. And it doesn't seem like there's too many ways of actually making that number go up to anything significant. So it looked like it was going to suck. And I said, well, that's unfortunate. I respect out of that and into Coal Stoker and kind of went on my way. Woke up yesterday and I was like, I really want to see what this does. So I did my second Ascendancy and put this in here. And then I respect out of all the Fizz stuff that I had and over into all the Fire and Ignite. So that's pretty much how I've gotten this build to where it is. Like I said, this is not a build guide. This is not a recommendation. This is more documenting some things. There are a couple of posts on Reddit here and there that talk about this. Most of them say it sucks and then they bounced off of it and moved on. So mostly this is for science, and that is kind of what we're going to look at as we go. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to show you what the one-handed mace of this looks like and how it works. Now, a lot of the damage that you're going to see is coming from the mace and the ignites and everything on the mace. A lot of this is not coming. In fact, you'll notice that it hasn't even kicked off the fire spell yet. So you get this meter that counts up. And the way this thing works, if you mouse over this, while active, gains energy when you hit enemies with melee attacks and triggers socketed fire spells on reaching maximum energy. So what this meter does is it counts up as you whack on enemies. This will charge up, and then once it's fully charged, it will kick off your spells. I have Flame Wall, Ember Fusillade, and Solar Orb. So you will definitely see the Flame Wall. You will definitely see the Solar Orb. The Ember Fusillade is a little different. You'll see some dots around my character that eventually shoot off as projectiles. And the first sentence on here, right here where this is at, gains 3 energy per power of enemies you hit with melee attacks, modified by the percentage of the enemy's ailment threshold the hit will deal. Meaning, the harder you hit, the more damage it does. And what we're showing right now is a one-handed mace. There's no fire damage on this. And if I go over into here, you will see that this does not impact the damage numbers over here. And even if I had a mace with fire damage on it, it doesn't impact this either. These are spells. In fact, you can click through these. I think you might be able to change the weapon set these are used for. Maybe if no, I guess it's all of them. I don't know. Clicking on these doesn't really do anything different. So there's no other information. It doesn't really seem like you can scale anything with this. There's one Reddit thread where somebody was talking about switching to a one-handed mace and putting a focus on because they could use the focus to increase damage, spell damage and everything from that, increase fire damage and stuff like that off the focus. But the trade-off is when you use a one-handed weapon, it takes forever to build this amount of damage up. So it goes really slowly, and I'm basically killing everything before I can even get this thing off. So we're finally kicking the spells off. I don't know if you noticed the Ember Fusillade pop off there in the background, but pretty much everything I'm doing, all the damage that I'm picking up is from like Herald of Ash, and on the passive tree, I've picked up all the fire nodes like Burn Away, so we get increased magnitude of Ignite, increased fire damage. We've got Burning Strikes to gain Fizz as extra fire. I've got Avatar of Fire to pick up basically 75% of damage converted to fire. We've got Fulmination with a big chance to ignite. And on my Rolling Slam, I've got Fire Infusion, so I get gain 25% damage as extra fire. We've also got Wildfire to spread the ignites around, and then Ignition, which supported skills have 100% more chance to ignite. Now, the interesting thing is I don't see on here, or kind of an annoying thing, I don't see in here where it actually tells you what your chance to ignite is. So I don't know what my chance to ignite is. And if I take this off, it doesn't change anything in here. They talk about estimated damage of ignites, but they don't talk about how much of a chance I have to ignite. So I don't know if that's 100% like I'm always going to ignite, or 100 is in like an additive thing. It says more, but I don't know. I know I need to look at POB on that and see what it says. But we've also got some chance to ignite somewhere around here. Well, there's a bunch of other chances to ignite that I haven't picked up yet. Maybe that's what it is. But I'm still I'm getting the ignites off. So at any rate, one-handed mace with a focus is kind of cool, but it takes a while. And this is one of the better, I know this is not necessarily a great one-handed mace, but this is one of the better one-handed maces that I have. As I built my Warburger up, I was doing dual one-handers, and this is one of the better ones that I had from that, and it's left over. And that's kind of where it's at, and that's kind of what it does. So we're getting 727 Rolling Slam damage. We're not really doing a whole lot. We're not kicking the spells off all that much. So let's see what happens if we swap into a two-hander. Let's see, probably got to go back this way. I'm guessing this is the dead end. No, there's some monsters. So we're at 45%, and now we're at 86, 93. So just a couple of hits on that pack started moving the number up a lot faster. The more DPS you do, the faster you can kick the spells off. So that's kind of an interesting thing about how this works. The one-handed mace idea is okay, I guess, and you can throw the focus on there. She's got some big AoE. But you'll notice that it's going off a lot more often. For whatever that's worth, you're getting the spells kicking off a lot more often when you do bigger hits. I mean, you're just doing more damage. There's a lot of those witches around here. Super slow. But again, this build is not necessarily optimized out like it should be. But you can see this is kicking off, and we're doing some... we're the ignites and the fire damage and everything that I got coming off the mace is doing all the work. That's pretty much the bottom line of this whole part of the video right now. But I wanted to show that if you do have some investment into... I don't have a very good focus, but if I had a lot better focus, I would be able to use a lot more of the spell damage, if that makes sense. We'll go beat on all these things here real quick. But I mean, we're kicking this off fairly frequently. It's not that big a deal. The interesting thing is on boss fights, you basically get this every time you hit the boss. This will reset to 0 because every time you hit the boss, you're doing enough. There's enough magnitude of or enough energy generated or whatever. Every time you hit the boss, it actually kicks that off. So you're constantly doing the spells as you do boss fights, which is kind of cool, and something to note for as we dig through this. So you see I just basically burned through that boss. No big deal. Let me grab this chest down here since it's set in there. And we are going to run back to town and have a little bit more of a conversation here. So for the sake of science, I want to just show a few things, and I don't know if it's interesting or not, but there are certain things that don't impact the spells. There are certain things that do. This is more to just illustrate what does and doesn't. So we'll dig into this here a little bit. This mace has no fire damage on it. It's pure fizz damage. Obviously, it's going to be a better mace than this one because it's got a higher amount of fizz damage on it, and we're getting 1800, basically 1900 DPS on Rolling Slam. If I take this off, you'll see that this 45 to 100 does not change. I can put it on and off, doesn't matter. It does not affect the spells. If I take this mace, which has some fire damage on it, put it on here, we lose Rolling Slam DPS, probably gain a little bit of fire DPS in there somewhere. But this number, 45 to 100, does not change. The only way you can actually change this is if you have increased spell damage, increased fire damage, things like that. There are things that will impact this, but fire damage on the mace does not, which I didn't expect it to be honest with you, but I was just curious about what it did, so I wanted to try it out and just demonstrate that. The other thing that's kind of weird is Incinerate, and I'm guessing because it's a channeling skill, although there's no specific list of things that don't work on this. For some reason, if I take this out, if I pick this gem up, you'll see that this lights up, like I can actually drop it in there. If I pick Incinerate up, this does not light up, and you cannot put that gem in there. So I don't know why that works the way it does. I don't understand it. The only thing I can think of is because it's got channeling on it, I guess. I'm not sure, but there is a limitation to exactly which fire spells you can use. And this is limited to fire spells specifically, so there's only certain ones you can do. I should point out that there is another limitation. So if I go in here, let's say I want to take this uncut skill gem and I want to level up let's pick a better one. What skill level are we at with these? These are level 6, level 3. Let's say I want to take this Ember Fusillade and level it up to level 6. So I go in here, I grab my uncut level 6 support gem, I click on Elemental. You'll see that it's going to give me Ember Fusillade, but it is not upgrading the Ember Fusillade that I have socketed. This is going to give me a level 6 Ember Fusillade. So if I take this and engrave it, I just now have a level 6 Ember Fusillade here. I still have my level 3 over here. So it doesn't upgrade the stuff that's in there. And furthermore, if you have a support gem and you're trying to figure out what support gems there are, you cannot see what support gems there are. So you have to know ahead of time what support gems you're going to put on those fire spells because it doesn't show up and there's no way of seeing it. In fact, if you click on this, you'll notice that I'm getting precision and vitality here because it's showing me the stuff as if it was like the Herald of Ash, something you have to turn on. I've not tried putting these in because I don't have enough spirit to put on here, and I don't know that there's anything that I would actually put on here. Actually, this Impetus one was one that I did use. I've got it over here. There are some support gems you can use with this thing, specifically like Mysticism, but a lot of this doesn't matter. Increase spell damage while on full energy shield. Yeah, maybe that would be useful, but I don't really ever have full energy shield. There's some minion stuff. There's some thorn skin stuff. You know, there's just not a lot here that looks like it would be very useful. You could maybe get +1 level of fire skill gems. I don't know. A lot of this doesn't really look like it's useful. So I don't know. But there are some weird limitations on it. There's certain fire spells you cannot use. You cannot upgrade directly into here. So you have to basically, I don't know how you'd upgrade this. Unless you had another character, you'd go upgrade the gem. You basically just get a new version of the gem. You can't tell what support gems you want to use. It gives you this list instead, which this list is kind of cool. Like this Impetus is actually kind of interesting. So this generates 40% increased energy. If you wanted to actually take this out and socket that in, you'll generate more energy as opposed to having a third spell. And this starts with 2, I don't know, probably maybe whatever level I'm at, unlocked a third one. But you can socket in. There are some support gems you can use, but you really need to know what they are because it doesn't give you any option of pairing things together because it's trying to work with fire spell on hit, not the socketed spell that's in there, if that makes sense. So that's another limitation, and you do get some increased fire damage. Like if I put on this 10% increased fire damage, that node does increase this number, but it only goes up by like whatever 10% of that is. So if 10% of this is what, 5, you know, so it's not going up very far. So these nodes do increase your damage, but they don't do a whole lot. Mainly what I've got going on here is a big amount of damage, DPS and fire ignites and all that coming from my rolling slam itself, and not hardly anything coming from this. There are spell nodes up in here to increase it, but you're increasing 100 damage, so it's not going to go up that much. Like you're not going to get 10,000 damage off of this. It's not, the way I've got things configured, it's not doing that. The one interesting thing that I did find that I did think was kind of cool, there's two actual kind of useful things on here. So you would look at this and you would think, all right, this is pretty largely just useless. You're not really dealing much damage off of this. It's maybe some extra stuff. Maybe there's something cool with a support gem. We could tie some ignites on and make the ignites spread everywhere. I don't know how ignites are generated, or if you have to, like, does my rolling slam have to generate the ignite by the amount of damage it does? Whereas these spells are going to do a little bit of damage. So the ignite's not going to be as big. You know what I mean? I'm not exactly sure how ignites work or spread or anything. So these, if you could spread some ignites through this, it may or may not do as a lot of damage off of it. I'm not too certain on that. What I've found on my rolling slam is that I need to have, I can't do any of the melee, any of the fizz increase like heft or anything like that give you 25 or 30% increased damage. There's the one that has no elemental damage. That basically means rolling slam can't do damage because I've got Avatar of Fire. But even the regular fizz damage ones don't do anything. So I put ignition on here. We've got wildfire to spread the ignites. And then I've got fire infusion for fires, or gain 25% of damage as extra fire damage. And on the weapon, the interesting thing is if I put fire damage in here, it's less, I get less output than putting in the iron runes to give me increased fizz damage. So increased fizz damage here on the mace works, where increased fire damage or flat fire damage on here doesn't work as well as the increased flat fizz. But putting flat fizz support gems in here doesn't really increase my or doesn't even increase my damage at all. So it's kind of weird. I don't know. There's some weird fire conversion stuff in there that I don't fully understand. But let's talk about what this can actually do and a couple of things that are interesting in the way that it works. So if we go back to our passive tree, there's this node up here called Equilibrium. Now, this one gives you 30% increased attack damage if you've cast a spell recently. So if you can get this thing to where it's casting spells fairly frequently, like this Ascendancy node might be completely useless, and whatever you socket in here may not do a whole lot. Like Flame Wall probably doesn't do much. You know, none of these are doing a ton of damage. Maybe there's some, like I said, maybe there's some support stuff we can do with it. But the fact that you are casting a spell recently, because if you can get this to go off fairly often, and when you're fighting a boss, it basically goes off all the time, that's a 30% increased attack damage if you've cast a spell recently. That's kind of interesting. So with this, I can get 30% increased attack damage, meaning I can hit a lot harder. Along the way to get this, I get increased attack damage here, we get increased skill speed, and we get increased attack damage here. So we can do a little bit more damage. That's 30%. Math is going to be hard. So what, 46% increased attack damage off of that, plus a little bit of skill speed in there. So that's kind of a nice little bump in it. And again, if we're fighting bosses, we can get that to proc constantly every time we hit the enemy. Pretty much, it's going to roll that meter over and fill it up. With Rolling Slam, it's like a 1-2 shot. So it kind of goes off all the time, and we're basically going to have 30% increased attack damage the entire time we're hitting enemies. So that's kind of cool. That's actually kind of useful. And as we go through here and look at this, you'll see that it's doing a decent amount of damage. I think we portaled out. So with the ignites and everything, we are using two-handed mace. I'm back to the right two-hander. So we're getting this thing to kick off fairly frequently. This stuff's all on fire. There is another option of, I think I've already got it picked up. There's a note in here that says something about burning enemies. I don't remember which one it is. Is it this one? These two here. So you, with each one of these, it's 14% increased damage with hits against burning enemies. So as long as they're burning, maybe as the spells go off, you set the enemies on fire. But I'm already doing that with the damage I've got going on. Like I just killed, what, 2 or 3 different packs of monsters and finally got this to go off. So it's not got an incredibly high uptime. Now, you may be inclined to think that this is completely useless and there's absolutely no functionality to this whatsoever and it's just complete garbage. Well, let's try something different. Let's take flammability and replace, say, Ember Fusillade into here, and we'll drop in impetus so we get increased energy. And I guess we'll do... Did I... mousing over it. Let's do Solar Orb. I kind of like Solar Orb. It's just kind of interesting to look at. It's more of a visual thing than anything. We'll wander out here. You can actually, it doesn't actually even show you when it goes off. In PoE 1, you'll see these things kick off when the spells go, but I don't think it actually goes off here. So we can actually drop with that increased energy node and just beating on things. This pretty much goes off all the time, and now we're starting to throw flammability into the mix. Unfortunately, it's kind of weird because it only drops flammability in that ring. I don't quite get how that works, and I know they've done like a big debuff on curses, so this takes a 1.5 second delay, but for mapping, I don't really need, or for general clearing purposes, I don't so much need this because I'm killing everything off anyway. It's not that big a deal. I'm doing fine without any of this damage or any of the spells or anything like that or the curses. But when you go to fight a boss, if we can go fight one here, actually, I guess we'll have to go down into here. If you go fight a boss, you're going to have pretty much 100% uptime on the spells. You're going to always have that 30% increased damage, and you're going to be able to throw flammability down and curse the bosses and keep the fight rolling. So as like a little bit of a utility part to this, it seems kind of cool. Now, again, is it really worth it? So I was doing probably, I don't know, 4,000 or 5,000 fizz damage with this build, and I was totally just walking through the campaign, no problems. I'd die once or twice to a boss here and there. It wasn't that big a deal. Well, this is taking a little bit longer than I expected. I was hoping we could get to the boss a little sooner. But I didn't have any problems playing Rolling Slam through the campaign at all. In fact, switching over to this, I've lost a ton of DPS. Now, I realize that I've taken a 75% reduction, or I'm sorry, a 25% reduction in damage because I've opted to use Avatar of Fire, which only converts 75% damage into fire damage. So there's a big change there. And I don't know that I'm exactly clearing as well as I was with just flat fizz damage. I feel like I'm doing worse now. It doesn't feel as good. And here we go. Here's a boss fight. So I don't feel like my build is doing as well damage-wise. From what I gather, when you hit an ignite, you're not dealing as much damage up front, but you're letting the ignite burn things down. And there's other nodes I can go into. I've started to head to this direction to pick up Immolation, which gives an increased magnitude of the ignite you inflict. So I know there's some other things I can do to improve the ignites and the overall dot damage that I'm doing with this, or not, yeah, I guess it's dot damage. But I don't know that this build is necessarily any better than, see, we've got flammability on him. I don't know that, bad time to stand there. I'm very squishy with this build. It'd probably be far more in my interest to go work on the other side of the ascendancy tree where the armor stuff is. This thing does not want to sit where I can beat on it. Let's get out of the way of that. Probably not want to stand in there. I don't have any poison resistance. So, man, this guy is just moving around too much. But you can see we're kicking the spells off. We're pretty much constantly getting it under flammability. Once it is under flammability, once it's got that curse, it basically just stays with it. He just pops up out of the ground and goes away every time. But you can get the idea. So I don't know. I don't know that this is necessarily all that great. I mean, maybe it could be pretty good. I like the flammability aspect pretty much most of all. Like, it's just regular fire damage. It sucks. You know, regular spell damage from fire and stuff like that. It's, oh, we don't have any, don't have the ability to cast. And this is where I could actually use Mace Strike, but he died from burning damage. So it works. Like, it's got some kind of cool utility to it, but it's not necessarily that great, and it's nothing that I would... I'm kind of torn. That's why I wanted to make this video, because I'm torn on whether I want to continue with this. I don't see this doing all that well. Adding flammability to it makes it work, and it does something cool. And with this equilibrium, I get 30% increased attack damage if I've cast a spell recently, which pretty much every time you rolling slam a boss, you're going to have that ability because you've just cast the spell. So it is kind of interesting. And there are things with like weapon swaps. We could certainly swap over to a wand and maybe do some fire damage with that. Or other spells, we could do some kind of other spells with that. I haven't tinkered with weapon swaps at all, so I don't know how that works. The big downside to this, and the part that I'm wrestling in my mind with, is there's a lot of downsides to this. First and foremost, you're going to have high int requirements. So I've spec'd into int at least 1, 2, 3, 4. I thought I had like 4 or 5 of them. I've also got this amulet, which has int on it. And the only reason I'm using this amulet is because of the int. So I don't have to tie up as much of my passive tree, because I need strength to equip the mace that I've got. I think part of the problem is that I'm relying on mace damage and trying to do big things with that, where I probably need to relinquish that and go into more of an int-based build, probably armor and energy shield instead of just all armor. So this is definitely not an ideal way to build this. That's why I said this is not necessarily a recommendation. And I would probably be going more into spells and stuff over on this side over here. So yeah, there's a lot of things that need to be considered with it. It's awkward to upgrade the spell gems. You can't see what support gems work with it. And I don't know, it's kind of an awkward thing all the way around. I don't necessarily know that Rolling Slam is the best thing to go with this. We could certainly go into something else like, we've got Molten Blast might be kind of interesting. Volcanic Fissure might be interesting. Shockwave Totem, Bone Shatter, and stuff like that. Like, there's some other options that may be better. Maybe a Stampede might not be too bad with this, where you're just kind of running around all over the place. Like, there's probably some better ways of handling this than what I've done here. But I started off with Rolling Slam, went into Fizz, and then just on the whim decided to try this. So there's no planning, there's no idea of what to do with it. I just kind of wanted to tinker with it and see where it went, and that's kind of what brought this whole video on. But that is what I have to show for this, for the Heat of the Forge Ascendancy. I don't know that there's anything useful in this. I've tried a few things. Probably better build creators than me could come up with something that's going to be a lot better. And this is a weird fusion of trying to do something with fizz damage and not as much on the spell side. But I think the flammability and auto triggering that with this equilibrium is kind of nice. So at least there's some utility in it. But overall, I was talking about how low my damage is. When I was pure fizz based, I was doing a lot more damage, and I could equip like heft and things like that that just bumped up my overall damage considerably. So I'm not entirely sure whether this is any good or not, or where it could go. But at any rate, it's documented. If you found it useful, I hope you found it useful. So anyway, that is going to do it for this video. We will catch you on the next one. Take care.